Hey everyone, welcome to the pre-show, which is very short tonight. Because in about 15 seconds, I got to go dark, and then we're going to go live. So welcome everybody. Get yourselves ready, and we're going to dig into a little show tonight that's kind of a rehashing of something old we've done on here before, but we've talked about doing it, and so I'd like to get it going and see what you all think of the new direction we're taking. So let's go dark. We'll be back in just a moment. Sit.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program. I'm your host, Scotty Roberts, and this is my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. You can go over to odysyradio.com and see the radio broadcast live, but it's just the audio. So if you're anywhere else or you're over there, you want to see this broadcast in its video simulcast, come on over to youtube.com/Scotty Roberts, and you will see the live simulcast in video, as well as you can join the chat room that's going on live right now. So welcome, everybody. It's been a long week, but we did a couple of nights where we didn't do shows this week. And so we're here tonight on Friday night, which is usually a let your hair down night, or we talk about ghosts, or we talk about all those kinds of things that are of a little letting your hair down kind of quality for Friday night. But tonight I chose a topic that has been a topic on this show before. And I looked at the date, and it's been 5 years since I talked about this topic. I have made mention of this topic, but haven't done it as a topic. And so I wanted to dig back into this topic about King David tonight. And if it goes well, we'll keep going on with it. We'll see how you all like it, what you think. It's been a long year already. Yeah, it's already April. So I want to thank you all for being here, and of course giving me your time that you would take to come in here. Even on the days I am not here, I get people that write me and say, "Are you okay? You doing okay?" Because I didn't do a show. And I'll tell you, lately, I don't know what it is. I have been absolutely overtired lately. Now, I hear that there are other people that are experiencing the same thing. Is this some kind of thing going on out there? Is it some kind of variation of some virus or something? Because I have been exhausted like the last 2 weeks, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything else I've got going on health wise, as far as I know. I wake up tired, and I go all day, and sometimes I'll fall asleep in the middle of the day. I'll be sitting here at my computer sometimes, and I just fall asleep. I'm working, and I blink, and I'm like, whoa, how long was I out? 2 seconds or 2 minutes? And sometimes I'll go lay down. And I've asked my doc, why am I so tired? He says, maybe you're not sleeping enough. I said, well, that was the first thing that came to my mind. I've always had problems sleeping, but that's what kind of hit me earlier this week. It was like, not lethargic. It was just Monday night was like, I got nothing. I'm worn out. I'm just going to not do a show tonight. Then Wednesday night came. I was fully planning to do a show, and then I just wasn't up for it. My brain didn't work. Even today, all day, I'm thinking, do I really want to talk tonight? Kind of thing. And, that's just the way it's been. And my mind's blanking on things, and not, okay, that sounded bad. And not in a bad way. I'm just like, I don't feel tip top. And then you see all these ads on TV or radio or videos about testosterone. Do you feel lethargic? Do you feel tired? Do you feel like sleeping in the middle of the day? And I thought, yeah, I feel all those things. And then it pushes testosterone or dopamine. Is your dopamine down? And so mechanics is my mind is always blank. And I was talking to Andy Dabbs. He said the same thing. He and Reagan, his wife, have been going through that the last couple of weeks too. So it's like, what the heck? So Leslie, good to see you over there. Randall Flagg, Steph Cuervo Queen, it's good to see you. And who else have we got in here tonight so far? Sean Stroik, nice to have you on board. Elderberry, good to see you, brother. And who else? Who else has slipped in here? I don't see a fresh name other than that. We've got a bunch of you out there. Sean Stroik is here. There's a bunch of you out there. Come on in. I see you watching. You can come on in and join the chat room if you'd like. Otherwise, just enjoy the show. You thought it was a bourbon night, said Sean. Yeah. What'd you start on? You ahead of us already? Rainey and I, just as a way of announcement, we're going to be doing a little ghost investigation at a place in the upcoming weeks here. We haven't got the date set yet, but it's with a good friend of mine who owns the River's Edge, which was an old nightclub decades ago. And it's always been a place to go inner tubing down the Apple River. When I was a little kid, my mom used to bring us all to the river's edge, and we'd all go tubing down the river. And became the river front became, for out here in the country, kind of notorious for being, boozers and people getting drunk on the river and accidents and all that. Well, Steve, he owned the dirt NASCAR track over here, Cedar Lake Speedway, with his brothers, and this place came up for sale, and he bought it. And it's got that. It's got the campgrounds in it and all. It's a pretty extensive property along the river. He's also starting another business right downtown, just a minute away from here. Remember, downtown Somerset is about a block long. But just across the river, doing some restauranting type of stuff over there. So that'll be fun. And all of that to say that we have, where the hell was I going with that? About the river's edge and all of that. I had a point behind all of that, but I rabbit trailed myself out of it. So I'm not sure what point I was making, but that's what my brain's been doing all week. So it's been one of those exhausting weeks. Now, I tend to think it has something to, if somebody remembers the point I was trying to make, let me know. Because I don't know where the hell I was going with all that. I sometimes get so wrapped up in telling the story or setting the stage that I veer off the topic. But anyway, I think my eyes have something to do with it. The tiredness. When your eyes feel tired, your whole face feels tired. Your brain feels tired. Your body feels tired. So my eyes have been healing for the last several weeks, and they're fine. I see fine. Sometimes it feels like I'm wearing, without my glasses, that I'm wearing glasses that aren't quite adjusted right for me. So I get a little headache from that, or kind of a, you get blah in the face. And so I think that has something to do with the tiredness of late. And I just feel tired all the time. Hopefully that'll all pass pretty soon. And in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I'm going to be able to get my new glasses, because they say I'll be all healed up in the eyes for getting new glasses. Because right now, having the cataracts removed, everything is fine. Everything is sharp out in the distance, just slight every now and then. And but up close, none of my glasses work. I have to use my bifocals, and I have to look through them funny and stuff like that. So it's just the way it is. No, I haven't gotten any new glasses yet. That's scheduled for the 19th, so which is 2 weeks out. And they wait about a month after the surgery to have you come in and get your new glasses. So yeah, that makes sense. There it is. So there it is. There it all. I don't know why I drifted off on the local businesses and stuff like that. I was making a point with it. Oh, that Rainey and I are going to be doing a ghost investigation at the River's Edge, the old nightclub there. Steve has refurbished it, but it's still the old place. And he says, yeah, that place is pretty creepy. And so we're going to go in there. We'll do some filming. We'll do some live stuff through the radio, maybe do it during the radio show. We'll have to see when we're going to do that. That's going to be a little closer in than going out to the festival, I know, when we try to do some of the broadcasts from out there when we're doing the Phantom's Feast in the fall. That's way out there in the middle of nowhere. And but River's Edge is right here in Somerset. It's 5 minutes drive from here. So we'll be over there and do something. So you can look forward to that. We'll announce that when it's coming up, when we're going to go do that. But that's coming up pretty soon. In the next couple of weeks, I think we'll be over there doing something. And we'll keep you appraised. I have no idea what to expect there because I haven't been there under the auspices of doing a ghost investigation before. So it should be interesting. So stay tuned on that. I'll give you more information as that comes along. Let's see what else we got going. I don't think anything in particular. I feel like, when you get that feeling like I've got a lot of things going on, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm kind of boring too of late. So anyway, there we go. And I'm going to share this with you just because my wife told me today. She fell asleep today. She's been the same thing, kind of tired out. And I'm down here working, and she was up on the sofa upstairs, and she fell asleep. And 3 of my kids are sick. They've all got stomach, not flu. They've all got stomach pains going on and stuff like that. So they were all home today. And I frankly think 1 or 2 of them probably could have gone to school. When I was a kid, if you grew up in my era, you had to be on your deathbed and, knocking on death's door before mom would let you stay home from school. So they got off lucky today. But so the little one, the 9-year-old, she fell asleep with Rainey on the sofa, and they were crashed. I mean, I walked through the room at one point, and I tiptoed because I didn't want to wake anybody up. But Rainey said she had this dream. I'm just going to share this with you. It's a little naughty, but she said she had a dream. She came down here and she was looking really pretty, that just woken up pretty, and she's sitting in the chair here and she said something to the effect of, wow, she said, I just had a great sex dream. And I said, oh, cool. Was I in it? And she said, yeah, it was you. You were there. She says, but then a tornado was going on outside. Just as we were getting going, a tornado hits. And you were like, no, we can do this. We'll make it. Tornado's not going to hit us. A typical guy. No, we can do this. And she said, and then she woke up, of course. So there's all of those kinds of dreams that kind of match up with real life. There is always something going on that prevents intimacy from happening. And I'm talking about even I can just go to hug my wife and a kid will come in and want to squeeze in the middle, or somebody's got a tragedy or a crisis going on. Yeah, that's a great question, I think, Steph. Doing it in the eye of the storm. So I didn't want to come across too prurient sharing the fact my wife had a sex dream. But, what can you call those that makes it, fancier term, sex dream. She had a naughty nightmare. I don't know, whatever. But the nice part is it was me. I was in her dreams. So, and she wasn't worried, it seems, in the dream. She just said it was there. And we were both watching it. And I'm like, come on, we can go. So I guess that's a guy thing. I guess. But then she woke up. So I don't know how it turned out. Ryan Gale. Hey, the Ryan. Good to see you, brother. Glad you made it in. John Piper. Good to see you as well. Sensual situation. Yes. Something like that. It's got to be in the dream realm, though. Think about that. Give me some ideas, everybody. What do you call that stuff? Now, tonight, as it says on the marquee, if you're watching the show on video over at YouTube, King David, the real man behind the invented hero. Now, this is a series I did 5 years ago. And I've talked about it. I've made reference to it several times over the years. But I thought, man, this might be a good time to maybe revisit this topic, because we do a lot of talking, and I do a lot of talking about biblical topics, especially a lot over the last 5 years. And what do those biblical topics look like? Naughty girl dream. There it is, Steph. What do those biblical stories look like when you apply a little look at them historically rather than just from a biblical point of view or a spiritual point of view? What do you come up with when you start looking at it? And the story of David is one that looks completely this way in one of the books of the Bible, the book of Samuel, but then over in the books of Kings and Chronicles, it looks like a completely different story. One is kind of the hardline facts. The other one is, well, it's really just an apologetic. And there was a man who wrote a book, Joel, I'm trying to think of what his name is here. Joel, he's the head of Hebrew studies at Yale University. And what the heck was his name? Joel Baden, Baden. And he wrote a book called The Historical David, the real life of an invented hero. And so I've kind of borrowed that from him because I really want to get into talking about this. Is this important for us to know? If we are people who believe in the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, are you Christian? Are you Jewish? What is your background? Song of Songs moment. There it is, John. A Song of Songs moment. Yes, and the young stag leapt like a roe over the hilly, pasture land. That's a very picturesque language for a naked woman's body in the Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, if you will, in the Old Testament. So this is where I want to go with this tonight. I want to give you a little introduction on this series, and I want to see what you think of this, because it's going to challenge your points of view, but not so much as to say, oh, I'm not going to believe that story anymore. But it's one that sheds some light, maybe some speculative light, on looking at an account that this Yale Hebrew study professor, a Jewish man, determined was written as an ancient apologetic, which there was a thing in ancient times where monarchs had apologetics written about them. Apologetics makes the bad people around you look even worse, and the good people look even better. And the acts of the subject hand, the person who is the main character, makes them almost God status. They're so good. But in a small village in Israel, about 3,000 years ago, there was a man and his wife who lived there. He owned flocks of sheep. He owned goats. They grazed in the fields a bit of a distance from the village. And one spring day, 10 men appeared in the village. They were messengers from a larger gang of fugitives from society who roamed the countryside, living as they could. And they presented the man with a request. They'd been protecting the man's flocks and shepherds out in the fields, and no harm had come to the man's property. So now they'd like the man to give them some money or food for their efforts. And the man, who had never, ever encountered this gang before, much less asked them to protect his property, refused. Said, I'm not going to give you anything. And he turned them away. He says, who are you? You're a bunch of thugs. And if you're protecting my property, my sheep, and my shepherds, I didn't know about this. And now you're begging for money and food? Get out of here. He sends them packing. Now, the next day, the leader of the gang showed up at the man's door with his full entourage, 400 men armed to the teeth. And shortly thereafter, the man lay dead. And the gang leader had married the man's widow, thereby assuming legal ownership of the man's flocks, his servants, his house, his fields, his lands. Now, what do you make of a sequence of events like that in a story like that? If this were a modern court case, the circumstantial evidence against the gang leader would look pretty bad. And it'd be hard not to conclude that what we have here is a classic protection racket. You know what that is? The initial message from the gang would have been seen as a thinly veiled threat. A threat embodied in the gang leader's appearance with his armed men and fulfilled in the end with the man's death. We've been protecting your sheep, and we kind of like the boss man would be very, very happy should you reward us in some way. And he's like, get out of my sight. I don't even know who you are. Sarah Yusuf asks, how do you balance hero worship and human frailty? Those are two distinctly different things, to be certain. I don't know. How do we balance that? Let's see if we can get into that a little bit. It's an interesting question, though. Yeah, RICO laws go rampant, says John Piper. So what do you make of this whole thing? So the device of marrying his widow would be understood as a legal means of justifying the acquisition of the man's property. And essentially, it's a cover-up. The widow, taken by force after all, and her husband lay dead before her, and she was surrounded by his killers, would be as much a victim as the dead man himself. So, though it may be the most plausible explanation given the information that we have, this is only one possible way of explaining the events. How we understand what happened, what meaning we make of a plain series of events like this, depends greatly on who's telling the story and why. As is so the case, often the case, particularly with events from the distant past, history, archaeology, anthropology, we don't have an objective reconstruction of the story. We don't have any court records to show, no eyewitness accounts. We have only a single version of these events, and that one is counterintuitive. It presents the gang leader as the hero and the dead man as the villain. And for 3,000 years, it's this version that has been taken unquestioningly as truth. For this is the story that comes from the Bible, the Old Testament, books of Samuel. And the gang leader was none other than David before he was the king of Israel. Now, when I've talked about the life of David before, and any time I talk about it, David is one of my favorite characters in the Bible. Believe it or not, it's not just Moses, David. It's one of my favorite characters. Even in the setting of a prominent, when I went to my theological school, when I taught in church, and when I preached stories about David, Most of the people are unfamiliar with David's early career as the leader of a band of misfits who was wandering the wilderness of Israel. He was kind of think of it this way, he was a bit of a Robin Hood character. There is a passage in the book of Samuel that says, when Saul drove David out and David ran for his life, all he had was the clothes on his back. And it says that he went and dwelt in the cave, and that he gathered to himself all the outlaws, all the dispossessed, all those who owed money, everybody who was in trouble with the law came and gathered themselves to David. Now, why? What draw did he have? How did they know who he was? Well, the people knew who David was. The story is clear about that. He was the captain of the king's bodyguard. And he runs to the wilderness. What happens? Everybody who's outlaw comes to him and forms his band of mighty heroes, his merry men, you could say. And in a sense, they are out in the greenwood of Israel. Israel wasn't a dry, dusty, deserty, rocky sand hole. It was a very green place with its deserty locations. So obviously David loved music. Hey, Scotty, said Amanda. Good to see you, Amanda. Yet David did love music. He played what would be the equivalent of like a lyre. They say a harp and something, but it's described as an old guitar, an old medieval lyre type of a looking thing, which gives you pretty nice sound. By the way, and he wrote lots of songs. So, considering that David is one of the most famous characters in the Hebrew Bible, it's remarkable just how little of his life story is part of our shared cultural knowledge. And this is undoubtedly in large part because most of us learn our Bible stories as kids in Sunday school or synagogue or religious schools. And most of the biblical stories about David, as we'll see as we talk about this, are decidedly inappropriate for young ears. There's a lot of parts of David that are pretty unsavory stories. They are R-rated to NC-17 to X-rated stories, some of them. And there's a lot of things about David that you would conclude when I get to the place that, say we finish this, if I take it into a series, you're going to find that David is probably not a very likable guy, despite the fact that the apologetic about him in the book of Samuel talks about him being the man after God's own heart. He sought after God's heart. He sought to be a good man in his heart. He was called the sweet psalmist of Israel. And there were all these things about him, that he was a righteous man. Yet you will find that he was what I'm going to lay the groundwork for here is that he was a violent man. This is why God did not allow him to build the temple. As much as David wanted to build the temple in Jerusalem, God said, no, I'm going to save that for your son. He's going to do that because he's going to be a man of peace. You are a man of war and a man of violence. And he used David to establish the borders of Israel. And David was a violent warrior. That's who he was. And he wrote songs. He sang songs. He sought God's heart. But how much of that was apologetic? Because David was also a murderer several times over. And the only way he got away with it was he was the king. He was an adulterer. He murdered to commit adultery. This is the guy. He would probably be a man that you would not like very much. You might look at him from afar and go, oh, he's a bad boy. He's a bad boy. I like those bad boys, you might say. But he was also somebody who was bad enough that you might not like him at all. Yeah, exactly, Sarah Yusuf. He was a man after God's heart and still capable of sinning, much like Adam, Solomon, maybe even Trump, says John Piper. Exactly. I've used not David, I used Thomas Becket as a picture of Trump at times. Trump, multi-billionaire playboy. For most of his life, gets into politics and says, I have got to clean up my act. I've got to be a better man. I have got to be the president of the United States. Who knows? We'll leave that one for another day. But how little of David's story is shared with us is what's interesting. And the most famous image of him is Michelangelo's carved in pure white stone statue of David. Compare this with Moses, who, thanks to Cecil B. DeMille's movie, The Ten Commandments, and other works of fiction for a younger generation, DreamWorks' The Prince of Egypt, the animated film, which was excellent, is rendered in full color and motion, from his birth to the burning bush to the plagues to the splitting the sea to the tablets of the Ten Commandments and the golden calf and all of that, all the way to his death. And our knowledge of David exists not as a full-length film, but as short clips and still frames. There was a good movie that was done on David. Richard Gere in the 80s played King David, and the movie was called King David. It was very well done. I think it was off historically, or off biblically, let's put it that way, from the Bible story, but the history and the nitty-gritty detail of the movie was very well done. If you have not seen that, it's an obscure little movie, but it's Richard Gere plays David. There's other known actors in the film. Alice Krige plays Bathsheba in that film. If you're a Star Trek fan, Alice Krige, she was the Borg Queen, the first time we ever saw the Borg Queen in the Star Trek film. But she was young and hot back in the 80s, and she played Bathsheba. And, of course, there were other actors in the movie as well. But you should look that one up. Well worth watching. I even talked to, by the way, my old seminary professor, Dr. Charles Ailing. He said, yeah, it's a little screwy to the biblical stories, but it really is a sweet, historical-looking film. My phone is on so loud, I need to turn this down. Every time that dings, it's distracting even me. So let me get all this sound turned way down so it's palatable. There we go. All right. So our knowledge of David exists not as this full-length picture film, of a life, but these snippets. And our first image of him is a young man bravely going forward to battle the Philistine Goliath giant is nothing but a sling and stone. Is the first image we have of David. And it's stuck with us for 3,000 years. It's a David and Goliath story. So it's stuck with us. Very violent, but look at the state of the same lands today. So sad. Exactly, Amanda. Everything's still in an upheaval over there. Still the same people against the same people. Now we see Goliath towering over the Israelite army in full armor. He's holding his great sword, his spear. He's taunting the Israelites to send someone out to fight him. And we hear David recounting his tales of fighting off lions and bears to protect his family's flocks. And then we see David stepping out from the crowd of the army to deliver to Goliath the immortal words, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts." And we see the smooth stone striking Goliath in the forehead, the giant falling, the Philistines scattering in terror before their fallen hero. Now, what David said isn't so far-fetched. And we'll see, we'll get into this story later. Not later tonight, but we'll get into it later. He says, "You're coming against me." He yells out at this giant. This giant has been taunting the armies of Israel for 40 days up to this point. David's just there delivering lunch to his brothers on the battlefield because he's home tending the flocks, being the youngest kid. And he comes and he says, I'll take this guy. I'll go do it. Saul put up, whoever can kill this guy, says you'll be greatly rewarded. And we'll get into that when we get into the story. And David said, I'll do it. And his brothers mocked him. They were like, you just want to be part of it. Get out of here. Go home. And he just stepped out. And while this giant's taunting the army of Israel, David steps out and he says, you're coming against me with your sword and your spear, your javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts. The Lord of hosts. I always thought that was a great name, a great title. But we see the smooth stone striking Goliath and killing him. And now from Goliath's death, we suddenly fast forward to David sitting on the throne of Israel. Not merely as king, but as the composer of the immortal Psalms. He has a lyre in his hand and the emblem of a great poet, like a bard. He's speaking those lines most familiar to us from the King James Bible, like a Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He restores my soul. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. This is David at rest, the stately ruler of a peaceful realm that he made peaceful. And he's offering his praises to the God who granted him victory over Israel's enemies, who spared him from disaster several times. And these are the two moments that best represent David in the popular imagination. But there's far, far more to his story. The full narrative of his life takes up 42 chapters in the Bible, spanning from 1 Samuel 16 to 1 Kings 2. And the story of Goliath takes up only one chapter. The writing of the Psalms is, in fact, nowhere in the narrative at all. It's a completely different book. And there's much more to tell of David. The details of the biblical account of David's life, even those that we're familiar with, are largely subsumed by the idea of David. An abstracted, romanticized, idealized figure in our religious history. He's less than a person of flesh and less than a person of flesh and blood. And then he is a symbol of a nation's glorious past and promising future. We may know Moses better, but we love David more. When I was a child, I, like every other kid in Sunday school, learned a simple one-line song accompanied by hand gestures, repeated at increasing tempo until we could no longer keep up. Jewish kids learn the same thing in synagogue. David Malach Yisrael Kai Venkayim. That's David, King of Israel, lives and endures. The song doesn't have a story. There's nothing to be learned about David's life from these 5 words. But what they represent, rather, and what was being instilled in us subconsciously, is David's status in tradition. We were surely far too young to understand, but it's noteworthy that this song describes David not as a figure of the past, but as a part of the present. He lives and endures, the song says, both in Hebrew and in English. These words obviously can't be used to describe a mere king from 3,000 years ago. Is he the once and future king? Was King Arthur, taken from the heroic David? So they obviously can't be used to describe a mere king from 3,000 years ago. Nor, for that matter, would it be appropriate for any other character from the Hebrew Bible. We would never say that Moses lives and endures forever, or that Abraham or Jacob or Isaiah or any of these people. All of these figures have legends attached to them, but David is uniquely timeless. Amanda down in Australia, she says, Mom had the most graphic Bible storybook, which I always looked at the pictures. Apart from John's head on a plate, I remember seeing a painting of that when I was a kid. David's story was horrible pictures as well. The Bible was scary to me when I was young. Bible's a scary book. There's a lot of scary, very violent stories in the Bible, very sexual stories in the Bible, very creepy, monstery stories in the Bible, wildly fantastic stories in the Bible, talking donkeys, rock monsters, dragons, you name it. But this timelessness is largely due to the third idea that's commonly associated with David, though it's one without any visual imagery. It's his role as the head of the lineage leading to the birth of the Messiah. This idea begins already in the Hebrew Bible. 2 Samuel 7:16 says, God promises David an everlasting kingship. Your house and your kingdom shall be secure before me. Your throne shall be established forever, God said to David. And as the prophets of Israel began to look ahead to a messianic future, it was only natural that they should imagine the future redemptive king as one from David's line. And so Isaiah, the prophet, famously announces the birth of the shoot from the stump of Jesse. The shoot, or the new branch, coming from the root or the stump of Jesse, Jesse being the father of David, who will rule in peace without end upon David's throne and upon his kingdom. That's in the book of Isaiah, Old Testament prophet. Jeremiah speaks of the time when God will raise up a righteous branch of David's line, and even more explicitly describes the time of Israel's restoration as one when they shall serve the Lord their God and David their king, whom I will raise up for them. Jeremiah the prophet said in Jeremiah 30, verse 9. So Ezekiel similarly foresees the return of David in the Messianic era. I will appoint over them a single shepherd to tend them, my servant David. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David shall be a ruler among them. That's in the book of Ezekiel. And so in early Jewish traditions, from the 1st century BC, the Messiah was known as the Son of David, a title that continued to be used in the Talmud. And it's most famous, however, from the New Testament, where it's used 15 times in the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, including the very first words of the New Testament, an account of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David. Matthew 1:1, first Gospel, first word of the compiled New Testament. Speaks of Jesus as being the son of David. In the Gospel of John, we read, has not the scripture said that the Messiah is descended from David? Jesus is said to have descended from David according to the flesh. That's Romans 1:3. A descendant of David, 2 Timothy. The root of the descendant of David, Revelation 22. So in the book of Acts, a brief history of Israel is recounted, beginning with the Exodus, in the telling of which, notably, Moses is not mentioned at all, but the culminating with David. Because of this man's posterity, God brought to Israel a Savior, Jesus, as he promised. Acts 13. So in Christianity, Moses and the preeminent lawgiver is the preeminent lawgiver, and he's downplayed, if not outright rejected, and David is raised up. Grim before grim, said Sarah Yusuf. Yeah, how about that? The legend of David is deeply woven into the fabric of Western culture. One need think merely of the range and frequencies of uses to which David and Goliath, that comparison, is put forward. And this particular image, certainly the most dramatic from the story of David, resonates deeply with both contemporary Judaism and Christianity. The Israeli War of Independence in 1948, the Six-Day War of 1967 were at the time, and have often been since, portrayed as a modern David and Goliath story, with Israel playing the role of David. In 1948, the small, largely ineffective but noisy mortars that Israel deployed against their Arab enemies were called Davidkas, or Little Davids. What about now, with the war that's going on now against Hamas? Trust me, folks, the war is not against Gazans. It's against Hamas. Is it a David and Goliath story? Who's the David? Who's the Goliath? I think Hamas is the Goliath. They're linked to Hezbollah. They're linked to all other Arab nations that want to see the downfall of Israel, the eradication of Israel. So Israel is defending its right to exist again. The Gazans are the sad, poor folks that are in the middle. But most of them support Hamas and Hezbollah, want the destruction of Israel, which is sad. And I'm blanketing a very simple explanation for what's going on. The problem is it's going on still. Hey, JP, he has arrived. 8B have arrived. It says typo city. So even now, when Israel's strength is relative to that of its Arab neighbors, it's obvious. The size of the state and its vulnerable geographical position keep this metaphor alive and well. On the Christian side, one can easily find numerous websites that equate creationism with David, and evolutionary theory with all the media, scientists, universities that stand behind it with Goliath. And not surprisingly, this rhetoric has entered political discourse as well. Members of the conservative Tea Party used to characterize themselves as David fighting the Goliath in liberal media. You can have that today. You can say 98% of the media is liberally biased. So your conservative media, which gets attacked all the time, is a very small percentage of conservatism. So it's human nature to idealize figures from the past, particularly those who are associated with origins. In the United States, we think of George Washington. You think of Thomas Jefferson in the uproar of the Revolution. His romantic exploits, a reaction caused by the sudden intrusion of reality in the previously unblemished image of our founding heroes. Idealizing foundational figures is a national and perhaps unavoidable part of constructing identity of who we are. And if we identify ourselves as Americans, then we look to our origins and to the people responsible for the existence of America. And as models for what we stand for, it becomes the utmost importance that these figures from the past be not only exemplars, but exemplary. As their descendants, literally and nationally, we attribute to them the values and the virtues we want to see in ourselves. Now, how they really were, what they really did, becomes shrouded in mists of time. We set them aside and we forget. What remains is the glory in the stories. We misremember the stories we recreate. And if this idealization happens with the founders of a nation barely 200 years old, this one, 250 years old, how much more so with the founder of the Messianic line that started 3,000 years ago? And in the case of David, we have both. He is the founder of the nation of Israel and the ancestor, even for some, the prototype of who the Messiah is supposed to be. And so it's not surprising that those aspects of David's life that are known are those that attest to his glory, his youthful bravery, his lasting poetry, his imperial kingship. And it's similarly unsurprising that the most famous description of David, stated first in the Hebrew Bible, repeated in the New Testament, is that he was a man after God's own heart. 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 14, and restated in the New Testament book of Acts 13:22. Can't believe it. We've only got 5 minutes left already. So the on the radio. So the idealized cultural memory of David in Judeo-Christian tradition serves the important purpose of providing a model for who the Messiah was going to be. And for ourselves as people, as communities of faith, we leave the historical David to the past, and in his place we admire an eternal David constructed of our own hopes and our own aspirations. By the way, those of you on the radio, if we end up running over here, just join us over on the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts for the Captain's Cabin, which just picks up. We don't even break. We just picks up. We play a couple of jingles, and we move right into it. So if you're over on the radio, you can come on over to the Captain's Cabin on my YouTube channel. Join the chat room. Now, the construction of an idealized David is what I'm getting at for tonight, frankly. And it's not a recent phenomenon. It began already in the earliest writings of David. As an illustration, I might return to the story we begin with, recalling the salient features. David, at this point in his life, he's the leader of a band of fugitives from society. They're living in the wilderness of Israel. They sent some of his men to request food or money from a wealthy man in exchange for having protected his shepherds and flocks in the wilderness. And when the man refuses, David arrived at his house with his fully armed entourage. Soon enough, the man was dead, and David had married his widow, acquiring the man's property in the process. And there are probably innumerable ways to fill in the gaps in this sequence of events, but none, it's safe to say, would be as tilted in David's favor as the Bible version of this story that we find in the book of Samuel. According to 1 Samuel 25, the man's name was Nabal. His name already predisposes the reader against him. It's the Hebrew word that means fool. So the guy's name, the guy who owns the flocks, fool. What's more, he's described upon his introduction as in the story as a severe and evil man. So the first we hear of him, this fool is his name, was a severe and evil man. His wife, on the other hand, Abigail, is called clever and beautiful, thereby setting up the reader for what's to follow. When David's men speak to Nabal, they do so with the utmost politeness, with formal greetings, obsequious expressions. Nabal, however, responds coldly, even aggressively, accusing David of being no better than a runaway slave. And David's claim of having protected Nabal's shepherds, though it's clear that Nabal never requested such protection, is justified by the unsolicited speech delivered to Abigail of an unnamed shepherd who confirms that David has indeed protected Nabal's men, and who throws in an insult to Nabal in the process. He's such a base fellow that none can speak to him, said this shepherd. And so a remarkable exchange follows between Abigail and David, in which she also insults her husband. Pay no attention to that base fellow. His name means boor, and he is a boor, B-O-O-R. And she praises David to the skies, even going so far as to predict, like a prophetess, his eventual reign over Israel. Now, does that all sound just too damn good to be true? She gives David and his men an elaborate gift to make up for Nabal's stinginess and effectively condemns her husband. Let your enemies and those who seek evil against my Lord fare like Nabal, she says to David. And radio audience, we got to leave you, but I'm going to stick with this, everybody else. We're going to continue on in the captain's cabin. So, radio audience, thank you for being here. We're going to send you on toddling on your way now, and we're going to get on with this. So, radio audience, live long and prosper. Join us in the cabin.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid radio program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We did a quick break. We're in the captain's cabin. Welcome to the captain's cabin. You know what I want to do? I want to just finish this little section and then we'll get on. Doug Stack, Grumpy Stack is in the wings. I'm going to leave you right there. Sit there for a few minutes, Grumpy, and I'll get to you. I'm not ignoring you. I see you there. Let me finish this little section where we left off. And we'll then we'll get into some other things talking about this. So we got this story about David, Nabal, the fool, the rich man, his wife Abigail, almost this prophetic thing about David. Now she gives David and his men this elaborate gift, and she says, "Let your enemies and those who seek evil against my Lord, Nabal, fare like Nabal." Or against my Lord David, fare like Nabal. And he responds and by blessing her for her prudence and for keeping him from doing any harm to Nabal. Though he admits that he'd intended to harm Nabal. How could he say otherwise? He's there with 400 guys. So standing there with 400 armed men, he makes eminently clear that he will no longer attack. And thus, it's a truly miraculous coincidence when 10 days later, God strikes down Nabal and he dies. And the meaning of this divinely ordained death is proclaimed by none other than David himself, who says, "The Lord has brought Nabal's evil down on his own head." And in the very next moment, David sends men to propose marriage to Abigail. Here he's been threatening Abigail's husband with his army of men, takes off. Nabal dies of a stroke, by the way, it's described in the Bible. And as soon as he hears it, he sends word to marry Abigail, proposes marriage. And so David sends his men. She accepts without hesitation. After all, she's already foreseen David's rise to power. And she obviously had little regard for her late husband. He's dead. Sure, I'll get married to you. So, without altering the basic sequence of events, the biblical version of what happened dramatically tilts. Stop doing that right in my face, please. Stops. I'm talking on radio. You've already interrupted me. You've made me stop to say that. Stick around if you want to talk. Don't wave your hands in my face when I'm talking. Guys, kids. What's the post I put up on my Facebook yesterday or today? Earlier? I can't remember when. The funnest thing about being a dad is being constantly told you're wrong by the people who are wholly dependent on you for food, shelter, and money. So, anyway, and the only reason I get a little testy with her, have you not seen on this radio show this same scenario at least 100 times? What am I supposed to do? Cut off a limb now? All right, you've worked yourself up to a limb. We've already worked through the digits on your hand. Anyway, so Abigail can no longer be seen as a victim now, but she becomes a willing participant and a willing newlywed, even a prophetess of David's glory. And Nabal's death is the work of no human hands, at least not David's, as the story emphasizes more than once, but it's a fact of divine punishment. God gives him a stroke. So how do we elevate or evaluate the claims of the biblical story? We have to begin by recognizing that the Bible is not objective history, nor was it ever intended to be. The idea, and much more so, the practice of objective history was unavailable to its authors. So to state it boldly, the Bible is not necessarily history, it's the Bible. The Bible narrative breaks most of the fundamental rules of modern history writing. That doesn't mean there aren't archaeological facts to back up the historical veracity of the Bible. It means, like now, we're even finding evidence that David lived, which there was no evidence before. Archaeological hard evidence. So the Bible narrative breaks most of these fundamental rules of modern history writing. We find in the biblical story presented as fact aspects that no historian could ever know. Things like private and unverifiable elements, including events that occurred behind closed doors, dialogues, or even internal monologues. We find characterizations of the various individuals in the story that are far from unbiased. And perhaps most notably, we find the introduction of divine intervention as an explanation for the course of events. We can hardly blame the biblical author for failing to follow conventions of history writing that developed thousands of years after he wrote his narrative. He's not following modern convention in writing history. This is what I mean by context. Who wrote the story? Why did he write it? What were the times in which he was writing? What was common to the times in which he was writing? What would the audience to whom he was writing have understood in their day and age? Not what we understand now. That's not context. Hey, Kelly Bell. Hey, Chuck Thurston. So we find the introduction of this divine intervention in this story. At the same time, however, we can't read the biblical text as if it was a piece of modern history writing. It may be describing the past, and in that sense, it's historical in nature, but it describes the past using conventions more familiar to us from the genre of historical fiction. It's kind of like reading the story of David is kind of like reading The Mists of Avalon about King Arthur. Good book. Historically, pretty accurate. But the events, it's a fictional story. But these conventions serve a particular purpose. They glorify and idealize the Bible's main character, and most importantly, their prominent hero, David. Thus, the aspects of this narrative that are foreign to the modern genre of history writing, that are more biblical than historical, they all work toward the same end: to denigrate Nabal, and to raise up David. And this can hardly be coincidence, especially when we see this pattern holds for the entirety of the David story in the 2 books of Samuel. And it shouldn't be surprising, since David is the unparalleled hero of Hebrew Bible. He's the king against whom the Bible measures all subsequent kings, and who stands unsurpassed by any who follow him. He is, as we've seen, the symbol of Israel's incipient messianic hopes. We shouldn't be surprised that the Bible version of his life is weighted in the favor of David. And so to realize that the biblical narrative is pro-David is also to realize that it cannot be read at face value if we want to know the real history of David. Know the real history of his life. Sarah says it's also an example of showmanship of God's ability. It's that as well. So, recovering the historical David isn't, unfortunately, as simple as merely reading and remembering the often overlooked biblical account of his life, as if a deeper reverence for the scriptures would lead to historical truth. Quite the contrary, the Bible is a necessary source of information, but it's neither sufficient nor particularly trustworthy. So for much of the past 3,000 years, for many of the people still today, such a statement is impossible to accept. For some, the biblical narrative is considered to be unimpeachably true, as the Bible bears the stamp of God, the inspired word of God, the miraculous inspired word of God. If it was written by God or with divine inspiration, there's no reason to doubt it. Although it could be noted, the book of Samuel and Kings, with which are concerned here, make no claims for divine origin or inspiration. And no one considered them to have such qualities for several hundred years after they were written. The unassailability of the biblical text is a faith commitment, not a historical fact. The attempt to recover historical fact means relinquishing, at least for this purpose, the faith commitments that preclude any challenge to the received tradition. What was that a minute? So did I, Chuck. And Friday night group, which was Bible study, still asking questions. Yeah. Sarah says, it is also an example of what happens when one has developed a relationship and is close to God. Maybe. I see what you're doing, Sarah. You're bringing up lots of comments that are bolstering the faith aspect of the story. Nothing wrong with that. We're going to get to all that stuff. Not tonight in particular. I'm just laying some of the groundwork for where I want to go with this. But to be able to uncover or recover historical fact about the life of David means that we have to relinquish, at least now for the purpose of this study, we have to relinquish the faith story, our faith commitments that preclude any challenge to the received tradition. Just step outside the box for a minute is the idea. Now, this means recognizing the Bible is a product of human minds, and that, like all literature, it's subject to the biases and the agendas, both conscious and unconscious, of its authors. I think issues of salvific nature have probably been maintained by God. The critical study of the Bible entails pressing against those biases, peeling back the agendas, Scholars of literature call this reading with a hermeneutic of suspicion, being aware that the conclusions to which a piece of writing leads us are those to which its authors want us to be led. And stepping back to ask how and why such efforts were made, we have to first remove the non-historical pro-David elements from the story, so to expose the basic events underneath. So when we do this, it's harder to maintain the overwhelmingly positive picture of David that we get from the Bible. In the case of David and the Nabal story, we're left with the stark sequence of events as presented at the beginning of this introduction that I was giving tonight. And when we attempt to understand those events from an objective historical perspective, we're left with the strong possibility that David may, in fact, have been running a protection racket in order to serve his needs out in the wilderness and the needs of his men. And he may, in fact, have killed Nabal and may, in fact, have covered up his acquisition of Nabal's property and wife by marrying Abigail. And given this potentially damning depiction of David, it's no wonder that the biblical author went to such lengths to render the story in pro-David terms. So to use a modern analogy, the biblical narrative might be considered the ancient equivalent of a political spin. It's a retelling or even a reinterpretation of events, the goal of which is to absolve David of any potential guilt and to show him a positive light, in a positive light. And as spin, it's been remarkably effective. I got to tell you, there's a lot more to this little introduction than I thought there would be. I've still got a bunch of notes here to go through. So maybe we'll pause it right there and we'll pick this up on Monday. We'll talk a little bit more about this. I'm looking at if this is where I want to end this. So I get into Josephus, I get into other interpretations of the story, yada, yada. David was running a protection racket. So to use a modern analogy, the biblical narrative might be considered the ancient equivalent of political spin, absolving David with this story. David, it seems, was in such distress. He's exceedingly humble in his request, emphasizes his need. He was in distress. He'd be glad to be beholden to Nabal, and did in effect come a begging to his door. And what little reason have we to value the wealth of this world when so great a churl as Nabal abounds and so great a saint as David suffers want? Interesting. What post-biblical readers and commentators have brought into the whole pro-David spin in Samuel, other biblical authors are also writing about David, were made really uncomfortable by this. The author of Chronicles, one of the latest books of the Hebrew Bible, seems to have been recognized that even when interpreted in favor of David, the events described in Samuel are still rather unpleasant stories to be telling about Israel's glorious king. Thus, in Chronicles, we don't find much trace of the David and Nabal story. In fact, David's entire time in the wilderness before he becomes king, which occupies 12 chapters in Samuel, is reduced to the list of warriors who went to the wilderness to support David as king. And it's noteworthy that these men are described as warriors. This is the Chronicles chronicler's revision of Samuel's description of David's band as every man, quote unquote, who has a bitter of spirit, who was bitter of spirit. And so any potentially negative aspect of David's life and actions to be found in Samuel, down to the smallest detail, is fully expunged in the book of Chronicles. The David of Chronicles is unimpeachable, which seems to be precisely what the chronicler had in mind when he rewrote the narrative of Samuel. And so our modern cultural memory of David stands in a long line of increasing idealization and reconstruction. From the spin of Samuel to the cleansing of David's image in the Chronicles, to the messianic connections in the New Testament, to the present, the historical David has been successfully and successively diminished, replaced by the legend that we're familiar with now. So what do you do when you're faced with the recognition that even the Bible presents this idealized David? That the Bible is only a written source of information we have about David's life has led some scholars in the past few decades to claim that David never existed at all. I think that's wrong. I think he existed. But we'll pick this up again next time, Monday. Interested? I think it's an interesting book, the book of Samuel, because it's stating for us an apologetic of who David was, not the real man. And we're going to dig into that some more. Hold on. I took my glasses off and I can't read it all now. Sarah said, no one got receipts? I missed something. There are rules and laws in regard to hospitality. Yes. Yada, yada, on it goes. Amanda says, I've got a lady and a few spoons. A ladle and a few spoons. Don't worry about the Mr. Bauer. Hope you're well. Okay, I missed some of that. I'm missing some conversation. Grumpy Stack, welcome. You've been sitting there a long time. How you doing, brother?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. I know we spoke early last week, I think, about the possibility of you coming on and just talking a little bit about all the junk that's going on around your shop that's affecting your life, affecting your business. Is that what you're on for tonight, or did I jump the gun?
Well, I mean, we could talk a little bit about that, but it's I missed most of the show because I was running around doing errands for
Sure.
for everybody. Yeah, it's been a rough couple of months lately.
Yeah.
Between the person getting murdered in front of my shop while I was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what happened? Did somebody just shoot him? What happened out front of your shop? What can you tell us?
Okay, so this guy wasn't I can say he wasn't an upstanding citizen. I mean, I feel bad
Sure.
for I feel bad for laughing about it because about 3 weeks before he was shot and killed, which actually happened yesterday, was 4 weeks exactly since he was killed. But 3 weeks before that, he was shot in the leg. He had pushed somebody and spit in his face, and he got shot in the leg, which he almost died from because he was shot in the femoral artery.
That'll
So
bleed you out quick.
yeah, he was flown. What the hospital here, which my wife works at, is not a real trauma hospital. I mean, they do minor surgeries and other stuff over here, but he was flown to Alexandria, which is about an hour's drive from us, and he was patched up and shipped out from there. That morning, actually, I was doing an upper control arm on a truck, and it was me, the customer, and two other guys that were helping me, work on this guy's truck. Well, I was sitting by the by the front tire, and I hear 9 shots. Well, the first 3 shots I thought were fireworks. I was like, well, it's a middle of March. Who's shooting fireworks off? Well, after the first 3 shots, I immediately hit the ground because I realized that it wasn't
Yeah.
fireworks. Yeah, it wasn't fireworks, and it was so close. It sounded like they were shooting inside my shop.
Wow.
He must have been either in my backyard or in the house behind me's backyard. And my friend who was standing up at the time, he decided to run out the side door, and he looked over and he saw the shooter running away. So he ran to his truck and started grabbed his gun and started running after him.
Wow.
So I started chasing after him. I said, "Get the hell over here! You're pretty stupid running after somebody with a gun." Anyway, I didn't realize what was going on until like I saw a bunch of people running down the street. Well, I went out to the front of my shop, and that's when I saw the guy who was killed. Um, he was laying in the street, and I've seen dead bodies before, but I've never seen somebody take their last breath, and that to me that's rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
You,
So that's had a pretty big effect on you lately.
Yeah, and not only that, the same week my dad had gone to the doctor, and he's 74 years old. He's been battling diabetes for the last 30 plus 40 years or so. Um he went to the doctor. He's been sick since right after Valentine's Day.
Oh boy.
And
It's a long time.
yeah, and the doctors had they wanted to do an angiogram or something. Well, they put him in for an MRI. Now the week before they did an MRI, but they didn't do the what is it, the contrast. Well, this time they did the contrast, and they were going to do an angiogram and stuff like that, but the doctor had said, his there's an artery in his brain that's 95% blocked.
Boy.
Yeah, so they didn't want to do surgery. And I my dad is, like I said, 74 years old. He's 30 years older than me. um I've never seen him the way he was after he found that out. He was so depressed. Like, he was asking my wife. My wife's been a nurse for 25 years, and we went to his house, and he asked if there was a assisted suicide in Louisiana. And that killed me, because my dad he's been an ass for most of my life, but
Right.
he's been there, and he never showed any kind of you know giving up. And for me at 44 years old to see him giving up, that broke my heart.
Yeah.
uh so fast forward 4 weeks later, I mean, my dad has come to terms, and he said, what happens. I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna be who I am, and if I have that major stroke and it puts me into a vegetative state, you know I'm gonna do a DNI or a DNR, but
Yep.
I'm at the same time, I'm not giving up. The doctors told him not to pick anything up, anything heavy up, and this and that. He's like, look, I lived my life. I'm gonna do what I gotta do, and of course, he's starting to pick stuff up, mix dirt and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So honestly, it's been a rough couple of months, and
I bet.
I'm getting by, I'm getting through, um, but you know what really has me is the fact that I saw somebody take their last breath. I mean,
Sure.
it changes life. It's I don't let it affect me, in front of the grandkids or my daughter and or the boys or anything like that. But it's eating away at me. You know,
Yeah.
so I mean,
What's it doing? What's it left you with? What are you thinking?
I really don't know. It's like, I know if it gets bad that I'm gonna go talk to somebody and help it out. I'm not gonna do anything drastic, but to me, it's like, life can end at any moment.
Yeah.
Since the day of the shooting, I was closed for 4 or 5 days. Um, but since that day, I haven't opened the front door to my shop. It's because I'm always, I don't want somebody, surprising me while I'm working, because I know the area I'm in is not the greatest,
Yeah.
and I just don't want that surprise. I'm telling you, 5 minutes after I close the door, I live 5 minutes away from the shop. So I closed the door for the day, and I closed the shop for the day. And before you know how small towns are, they start
Yes.
talking right away.
Yes.
So it takes me 5 minutes to get home. By the time I got home, I heard that the dude who was shot and killed, I did it.
Oh.
You know, he robbed me, so I shot him and killed him. I
Oh
said,
my.
yeah, I said, why am I gonna do? You know, if I was
Yeah.
to shoot,
Yeah.
if I was to shoot and kill him, I'd do it on my property, not
Not
while
gonna
he was.
chase down a guy for stealing something and shoot him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't carry that much money. Like if I get a big sale, normally I get the cash or the check or whatever it is, and I go straight to the bank. So I have change of $100. That's about it. So if somebody came and robbed me, I have maybe 100, possibly $200. I'm not gonna run somebody down and shoot and kill them.
Right.
If I were to do something like that, I do it while he's on my property, and the only way I would do that is if they had a gun to my head.
If you felt, yeah, that your life was being threatened.
Exactly. And so everything was going around. I heard those stories that he robbed me, so I shot and killed him, which, you know, not the next day, but the following day, it was a Saturday. The guy's brother called me up. The guy who was killed, his brother called me up, and he's like, "Man, I just wanted to know, is it okay if we park on your property?" I was like, "Why do you want to park on my property?" He said, "Because we want to do a memorial." I said, "Look, as long as there's no violence and y'all pick up the trash, I'm fine with it." He's
Hmm.
like, "Okay." He's like, "Okay, thank you, man." He's like, the sheriffs are giving us problems. They don't want us being over here." I was like, "Well, look, be respectful to them. Let them know, and I can even call them and let them know that I give you permission to park there."
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. I said, I asked him. I said, "Look, um, I said, what have you heard?" He's like, "Man, I heard a bunch of stuff." I said, from what I heard. is they're telling me, or a lot of people are saying that I shot him. He's like, dude, he's like, I'm a customer of your shop. I've been to your shop a million times. He's like, I know you wouldn't do something like that.
Sure.
I was like, well, I mean, thank you, because I
Yeah.
was kind of getting scared, because the family is not,
Well, did they catch the guy who did do the shooting?
no, and
Okay.
what makes me mad is they don't even care.
Oh my. Yeah.
Yeah, they really don't care. I mean, the town, it's dying. Gangs are trying to take over, and they have affiliations to like Los Angeles and New York. And it's like, man, I ran away from. Well, I didn't run away from it. I got away from New York because I didn't want to bring my daughter up in this kind of environment.
Sure. Sure.
So, but the problem is the chief of police here is ridiculous. Um, we only got like two or three cops, and honestly, I don't even know why they're cops, because to make $13 an hour with all these people running around uh, with all these guns that are illegal guns, I'm not against guns,
Sure.
but they're unregistered or stolen and this and that. I wouldn't work as a law enforcement officer in this town, not for $13 an hour.
Okay.
So I mean,
I
I
wouldn't
really,
either.
yeah, I really don't blame them for not having the people, the cops that they need. But at the same time, no matter how bad this person was, he didn't deserve what he got.
No.
And like I said, I mean, it's dark days over here. It'll get better,
Sure.
but it takes time.
Mm-hmm. I hear you, brother. Yeah, there's stuff like this is stuff that sticks with you, and then you have to sit and try to be reasonable and logical and think through the stuff that is. I mean, face it, it's a little frightening to
Hmm.
think, wow, this my neighborhood has gotten to the place where people think they can kill each other in front of my shop.
In
It's
broad
not even in
daylight,
hiding anymore. So you think, is this the place I need to keep my shop? Is this the place I need to live?
and that's
But then
been a
there's
big
all
question.
the expense of moving it all.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like it's no easy task.
But even that, you know, at the expense of moving it all and going to another place where it's okay now,
Hmm.
but what happens in 2 to 3 years?
Right.
You know, it's bad everywhere.
Do you stay and it's like I was driving through Detroit with a friend of mine who grew up there, and I was a transplant there, and we had to go
Hmm.
way downtown icky Detroit to do something business wise for his dad's company. And we came driving back through, and there was some guy that was slapping and beating a woman right on the side of the sidewalk as we're driving by. And I'm like, dude. And I said, stop. He goes, nope. He says, don't stop.
Hmm.
He says, you do not want to stop in this neighborhood. You do not want to get involved in that unless you've got the cavalry behind you. He said,
Exactly.
there is no point. He said, this is the way it is. There's no one to help. And now here's the big question. Can Detroit recover from that? Uh, Detroit's a totally different question than your little town.
Yeah.
But does a town recover from that? What's it take for it to recover?
Well,
Everybody's got to band together to make it better. And but then in the meantime, there you are. You're stuck with it. So what do you do? That's the question you got to ask. What do I
you,
do?
it starts with one person,
Yeah.
and one person gets with another person, and the town didn't go down overnight.
Yeah.
before my wife was born and raised here, and when she was born and raised, you know, this town was wonderful. I mean, everything was pristine, and the drugs have taken over. And I've lived in this town for 10 years, and over the 10 years, it's gone down the drain a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it can turn around. It's just everybody needs to band together.
Right.
And it's getting to the point where there's a lot of people moved out. They moved to the outskirts because, it's the country. Everybody likes that. And
Sure.
they left you know, they left the crap in here. And the
Yeah.
crap is taking over. But people are starting to band together and wanting to take this town back. So I mean, it's gonna take a fight, but I think the town can get a lot better.
Sure.
And you know, I'm not gonna say I'm gonna change it because I'm just one person, but my voice is gonna be heard.
Yeah.
And honestly, in the neighborhood I'm at, it's I'm pretty much the only white dude walking around. But
You're the minority.
yes, I'm the minority. It my shop is the minority, but honestly, I have so much there. So many people over there respect me. It's because I'm very respectful to everybody around, except the two crackheads like three houses down from me. I'm very mean to them.
Yeah.
But uh, like I said, the guy who got killed, his family they come to me all the time and they're like, dude, thank you for doing what you're doing. So I'm respected over there, and I'm a nobody in this town. Like, okay, my last name is Stack. I am between me, my wife, and my daughter, we are the only Stacks who've ever lived in Ville Platte.
Okay.
I mean, my wife, her maiden name is Fontenot, and Fontenot, Manuel,
Fontenot.
yeah, Fontenot, Manuel, and Guidry and Swallow are huge in this town.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like
We are French. Can't you tell by outrageous accents?
when when people ask my last name, they're like, "You're not from around here, are you?" I said,
You're not
"No,
from around these parts.
no." But what I like is, I own a business, and people know me. I could go anywhere in this town and they all know me. I may have no clue who they are, but they all know me now.
Well, hopefully, Doug, you're going to be able to do something to manage this a little better. You're going to need, yeah, it's the people, but it's like you need to get all your local politicians on the right page, vote them out or vote them in or threaten them politically.
Yeah,
You better get on board with this because you got a whole bunch of people in this town that want this changed and this area changed. And we want to get, I'm going to assume that because it's degraded a bit, that investment in your town is down, probably financial
very much.
investment.
Yes.
So it's not growing. You say, what can we do to make this place grow? And
And now see the the previous mayor was mayor for I think 12 years.
mm-hmm.
That was our first step to turning it around.
Yeah,
The present mayor, he is trying like hell. to turn things around, because the previous mayor, like before she got into office, everything was going great. The Main Street was full of businesses, this and that. And in her 12 years, people just started moving out. It was a very uh business, what is it, unfriendly, what's the synonym? It was very, she drove a lot of businesses out of town.
Oh,
And she was very business unfriendly.
what did she think she was accomplishing?
Oh, she was lining her pockets.
Oh,
That's pretty much what it was. City Hall was 98% her family. She
wow.
she yeah. She and she was brought up on charges. Okay, so this city, when she became mayor, I think the mayorship was like $23,000 a year. Within before the first term was up, she was up to $73,000 a
Wow,
year.
that's quite a raise for yourself.
Exactly. And her expense account was over $30,000 a year.
Wow.
And she would fly to France and this and that and do
I have to
all
go to
this.
France to study our town.
Exactly.
So, oh
Because
my.
I don't
Wow.
know if you, Ville Platte in French is flat town. That's what it is. Ville Platte, flat town. So, she would go to France and say, "Oh," she'd go to Paris and be like, "Oh, I'm studying, our roots," where the roots weren't even in Paris. It was somewhere like,
Right.
100 miles away or something like that. But she enriched herself, and
Well,
but that's
the
Louisiana
same
for
old story, isn't it? For thousands of years.
exactly. And Louisiana is one of the most corrupt states as far as
Wow.
politicians. I'm sure you've heard.
I have heard. So, I did not enjoy my time in Louisiana. I was only there for 4 or 5 months, but
Yeah, but I mean, you went to the Lake Charles area, and Lake Charles after the hurricanes had fallen off too.
yeah, it didn't seem like a place I wanted to live anyway. I wasn't real. You get up on that high bridge
Hmm.
and you look out, and all you see are all these refineries and stuff like that. It just wasn't my place. It's just not a
What
place I wanted to be.
and you see that right there. Okay, Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and like the big cities. That's where all the good jobs or all the plants are. You come out to something like Ville Platte or something like that, I wouldn't say Opelousas, because Opelousas is just, it's a bigger Ville Platte.
Sure.
But you go out to like say Scott or Youngsville, it's very laid back country style type living, and it's a great place to live and a great place to grow a family.
Hmm.
But the closer you get to the big cities is they try to be the big city.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's unfortunately that's where most of the good paying jobs are, the plants and stuff. But like I said Youngsville, when I moved down here, I moved with my parents, and then I bought a house in Youngsville, which is about 50 miles from Opelousas. And but it was like 3 miles from Lafayette. Lafayette's pretty big, but Lafayette is more of a it's more of a, I guess, preppy kind of city.
Sure. Sure.
you know It's
Even though
it
preppy's a little outdated, but I know what you mean. That
yeah
upwardly
it
mobile. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's a safe city. Um, it is more progressive than I would like, but you, that's where like the conservatives moved out to Youngsville or
sure.
Broussard, which is the surrounding area. So they still commuted to Lafayette to work, but when they get off and they go home, it's conservative heaven.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So there's a lot of give and take with Louisiana, but at the same time, the corruption, it's been around since the 1800s or even 1700s. Who knows?
Sure.
It's the good old boy system. You know, that's where the good old boy kind of thing started, was in Louisiana.
Boy. Well, I do not uh, wish you the need to have to relocate. I hope you can make things work there, and I know what you're feeling. You see stuff like that going on, you don't know what to do next, and it's affected you personally, and so you want to know what to do. Do I need to pack a piece now? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And
Uh,
it leaves you second guessing
okay,
everything that's going on around you. I get it.
so let me put it this way: I've always had
Yeah,
a firearm in the shop. I've always, since I opened the shop, I've always had one. Up until the day that happened, my firearm was in my office. Since that happened, since I reopened, it's been on my hip.
yeah,
And my thing is, I'm not a big I'm not a big uh handgun person. I I'll deal with rifles and shotguns all day long,
yeah,
but handguns to me, uh, not that they scare me, but it's easy access to where I could just pull it out
sure,
and do what I have to do.
yeah,
And I don't like to have to hold it on me. I don't
right,
like to have such easy access, because you don't know what can happen in a split second. And yeah, in a
right,
split second somebody can kill me,
sure,
but at the same split second I could kill somebody.
yep.
And I don't want that on my conscience, but I have to have it on I have to have it.
Who nobody I think in their right mind really wants to kill anybody unless you're psychotic.
Yeah,
Um, I would have no compunction killing in defense of my family
exactly.
if I had to.
Mhm.
Not that I want to, not that I find that, oh God, I hope this happens someday so I can do this. It's nothing like that. I'm not psychotic that way.
Yeah.
But you want to, um, you definitely want to be safe, but you
Hmm.
also don't want to second guess. In that
No,
split second, are you the guy that's going, should I be pulling my gun on this situation right now or not?
exactly.
Because if I pull it, am I going to shoot it? Who am I going to shoot? Does
I'm
the
gonna
guy
have to
deserve to
do
be
so.
shot? Am I misinterpreting things? Am I whatever?
Yeah. And that's my biggest fear is if I'm gonna pull it, I'm gonna have to do something with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Uh, Justice, Goddess Justice says it's nice that you have the option, though, to carry. Not all of us do.
Yeah, and see, Louisiana has always been an open carry state, so as long as it's seen, you can carry.
Hmm.
Um, as of July 4th of this year, we will be a concealed carry state where we don't have to have the license to
Right.
conceal. So honestly, what I do at the shop is I pretty much conceal carry. I don't have a concealed carry license, but I do have, it's seen whenever there's law enforcement around, I have my shirt up to where they
Yeah.
can see it. But certain people I don't want them seeing. So it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. So, yeah, I'm not a tough guy who walks around and goes, Lee, I got a piece. I got the heat. I got heat on me. I'll take them out. It's not, I would never want to seek that, but,
Yeah. And I'd rather
um,
not,
I would rather not ever have to be in that position where I have to make that decision.
yeah. And
So,
and the thing is, yeah, I am respected, but I know there are people that do not like me. So at the same time, I have to be aware of my surroundings.
uh, uh, Pearson Castile says, my blind buddy is big into firearms. Didn't see it coming, but he has more info on it all than anyone I know. Probably big in the interest. I'm pretty sure if he's blind, he's not shooting, is my guess, Preston. So,
But he
or
can
Pearson.
probably tell you the caliber gun or the type of gun just by sound.
Yeah, my 20-year-old says, Goddess Justice is Mia. She says, or Mira, she says, my 20-year-old is 6'2" and brown. He's completely geeky marshmallow, but in dangerous situations, no one sees that. They see a threat. Law enforcement tends to shoot first and ask questions later.
And Goddess, I'm gonna tell you on this much. It's not in all cases. It may see, my daughter is dating a brown person. I love him to death, and he's geeky and marshmallowy, and I'm telling you,
Bring that description home to him. Yeah,
he's the biggest geek and the biggest marshmallowy person, and every time he's been in contact with law enforcement, yeah, they're gonna kind of be like, but he speaks very respectfully,
that's
and
good.
and
He was
and
raised
that,
well.
yes, he was raised very well, and it sucks that there are cops that way,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's not how every cop or every white person or it's not how everybody treats everybody. That's a big thing with me. You know, my daughter, she's mixed race. She's half me, half Vietnamese,
sure.
and she's been looked at because they used to call her the Cajun Asian because
Ha,
she has the almond shaped eyes, and if you looked at her and you'd think she'd have an accent, but she sounds like a little Southern belle.
nice, nice.
But as far as race, honestly, I think the whole race thing is um, amplified by the media because down here, it doesn't matter black, white, whatever. We're all family down here.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. John Piper says, let's clap for the nerdy and the geeks.
I wish I was nerdy and geeky because I probably have a lot more money.
I don't know. So, maybe.
Or I might be homeless. Who knows?
Well, we are coming up on closing time
All
for
right.
this show. And as I have already said earlier in the show tonight, I'm already exhausted. So we're coming up and I'm wearing down real quick, Doug. It's good to see you again, by the way. I haven't seen you for a while. I see
Yeah,
little smatterings of you.
I'm
So
sorry I've been distant.
that's all right. It's all right. And you make it when you can.
Yeah,
And it's just good to see you.
good to see you.
So
Hey,
we
I'm
will.
gonna need you to text me real quick though, cause
Okay.
I got a new phone and I need phone numbers.
Oh, you got it. Do you have the same phone number?
Yeah, it's the same phone
Okay.
number.
I'll
All right,
text you with my number, my information. I've
thank you,
done that.
sir.
You get a new phone, and all of a sudden you're like, isn't this stuff all supposed to transfer over? And then you hit the transfer and it transfers. It takes hours. And you go in and half your stuff's not there. You go, well, what
Well,
did that actually do?
well, no,
So,
this one is just a temporary phone because it went to I went from a Galaxy to an iPhone. I'm going back to a Galaxy.
oh, yeah, I'm on a Samsung, and I like iPhone, but the problem with iPhone is it's so proprietary. Everything costs more money. Everything is
Mhm.
because it's all Apple. Hate
Yeah,
to say that. I've been an Apple guy since the late '80s,
yeah.
but well, my computers anyway. So, well, anyway, Doug, I am going to lapse very soon into incoherence. So while I still have cogency about me for the evening, I'm going to say thanks for coming on. Thanks for being here. I wish I had more to say and more I could do. I understand where you are at. We'll talk some more.
All right.
And
Thanks for having me.
maybe come in on Sunday if you're around, and we'll for
I
Sunday
should
morning, and we'll talk a little bit, get more people involved.
I
So
should be around. Thank you for having me, and sorry for taking that the topic in a 180-degree.
that's why I didn't bring you in right away. I knew what you wanted to talk about, so I had to finish my topic up. So,
Yeah.
Doug, you have a good night, brother. I love you.
You,
Good to
you
see you.
too. Love you.
Bye bye, everybody. Uh, Mir, you rest well and have a good night yourself. And John Piper, may peace and blessings be with you and yours as well. Thanks everybody for being here for the show. It's an interesting topic. It will, like I said, it's going to challenge the way you think about things. I don't think it doesn't distract from your faith unless you let it. It certainly, though, makes you question what you've been reading and what's the truth, and you ask for truth. You look for it. We'll talk about more of that later. I'm going to get, like I said, I'm at the end of my day. I'm at the end of my very tired week. And I think some of you are too. So you all skedaddle and get to bed or do whatever you're going to do. And I will see you again Sunday morning for It's Sunday. And we'll talk some more. So you all have a good weekend. And damn, that's about all I got. We'll just go from there. How about that? Live long and prosper.